Hey, look at that, I'm back, for real this time. You know, I've been making videos for a while now. I've covered rock bands and artists, some occasional rap, more rock bands and artists. Yeah, a lot of my channel has had a giant focus on that genre in particular, as well as venturing through the more underground and weirder side of music, I suppose. But I actually never focused primarily on electronic music, so let's talk about electronic music, let's talk about Daft Punk. I mean, come on, you probably heard of this group before. They're one of the most popular electronic acts of all time, with several hits, accolades, and a mostly really good discography. Mostly. Yeah, as the title of the video will suggest, I've been curious to talk about what is often known to be the black sheep of Daft Punk's discography, Human After All. But to fully understand this album and what it represents for this duo, I think it's only fair to give a little context to the two preceding albums. First, you got Homework, which was certainly an interesting debut for the group. It does have several of the elements that you will find on every Daft Punk album, that being the group's repetitive nature when it comes to using loops to its advantage for the most part, but also on how accessible and instantly catchy the songs tend to be. Homework has a lot of that, but it also doesn't have a lot of that. Yeah, Homework is in a way a bit of a experimental album. I don't know if experimental is the best way to describe it, but there's a lot of weird cuts here, which can be found mostly on the second half of the record, with songs like Rolling and Scratching, No Yeah, and of course my favorite weird thing this group has ever made, Rock and Roll.
But trust me, these guys are like real musicians. Just listen to some of this and it'll blow that poppy trash music right out of your head.
Also, another thing that is worth noting is that a lot of the more abrasive cuts from this record did end up influencing the other well-known French electronic duo Justice. I mean, you can definitely hear the Homework influence in some songs from their debut album, most noticeably at the very least to me, Let There Be Light, but you know, that's a discussion for another day. Also, despite Daft Punk's discography being relatively pretty short, one thing that I've always admired about the group is how every album from them stood out in one way or another, and Homework is certainly no exception. Not just because of how mechanical and abrasive and ugly the record tends to be throughout the second half of the album, but even the first half of the album have a lot of well-remembered classics that actually lean more into acid house and tech house than anything else afterwards. And when it comes to commercial success, well, that's also a factor that has been prominent in Daft Punk since the very start too. Daft Punk and Around the World were pretty successful back in the 90s and certainly gave the group a wave of popularity that they will go on to further expand on their next and most popular album, Discovery. I mean, what can I say about this album that hasn't already been said by many other people out there? It's an absolute classic, not only for electronic music, but also for music from the 2000s as well. It was the group's transition from the more tech house-centered sound of their debut to a more disco-centered house sound, and it's a sound that not only the group managed to absolutely nail that, like the transition was so smooth and so efficient that I don't even think there were really many people back then that were turned off by the shift in sound, considering that the essence of the group was clearly still there, in fact has evolved more than anything. But it's also a sound that the group managed to find a perfect balance on as well. Like, yeah, I do enjoy how weird and mechanical Homework was sometimes, but to the expense of the record losing focus of its strengths, if I'm being honest. Discovery, on the other hand, explores so many different grooves, soundscapes, several sounds, song structures, samples, etc, but also managing to stay focused. None of the songs feel out of place, and they all complement each other so well when it comes to how they flow each other and just generally feel like they all belong in the same album. I mean, just by listening to Discovery, you can very much tell that they perfected the formula here. Also, it has so many of their best songs as well. I mean, One More Time, Aerodynamic, Face to Face, Voyager, Something About Us, Digital Love, even Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Despite being a song that I think it's, well, a little overrated personally, I can still understand its status as one of the group's classics. And yeah, of course I cannot forget how popular the album was generally as well. Before Get Lucky in 2013, One More Time was often known to be the group's most popular song, and a defining song from the early 2000s. Like, it's honestly a great song to play at a party as well. And a lot of people loved the album. Critics probably took a little time to see it as one of the essential records of the 2000s, but it certainly has earned its legacy as an amazing electronic album, which makes their next album even more strange in retrospect. Well, I guess we can finally talk about the black sheep of Daft Punk albums, and I'm not gonna lie, this is probably one of the weirdest albums that I've ever heard from a mainstream artist. Just like Discovery, this was an album that also marked a shift in sound for the group. Homework did tech house, Discovery leaned more into disco, and Human After All leans more into rock. And I mean, despite how good of an idea that sounds for a group like this album is unfortunately not very good. I mean, is it a boring album? Oh, definitely not. I think it's fascinating more than anything. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even bother making this video in the first place. But it's still an album that definitely suffers from a lot of things, or well, lack thereof. I think the first weird thing that should be worth noting about the album is something that isn't even part of the album itself. I'm more so talking about its background and recording years. Opposed to both Homework and Discovery, which were albums that took both several years to record, Human After All on the other hand took only 3 months. And I guess in some ways this makes sense considering that I think Daft Punk was going for a more minimalistic approach for the album. I mean, I guess this album does sound minimalistic in a sense, but hey, if you're gonna go for a minimalistic approach, you have to know how to do it right. And B, Daft Punk were already somewhat minimalistic in the first place. Like I said before, one of the most defining aspects of Daft Punk were their repetition and their simplicity. But I feel like Human After All goes too far with it. Like, this album feels like it's being minimalistic for the sake of being minimalistic rather than doing it with a certain purpose. And because of that, it results with a lot of songs from the album feeling half-baked and incomplete. And all of this is even more baffling to me because I actually think the album does legitimately start really strong with the first track. Alright, I'm gonna drop a little hot take in here. You guys are ready? Okay, here we go. This is my favorite Daft Punk song. Do you remember what I said about how good and interesting of an idea it was for an electronic group like this to lean more into rock? This is the only song that fully delivers on that front, and man does it deliver. Not only because they actually managed to combine perfectly their robotic sounds with rock, like so smoothly, like toast and butter. I mean, I could say peanut and butter, but I don't actually like peanut butter. Oh, shut up. But it also feels like the only song on the album that actually feels like it has a defined structure, and a sense of the song actually feeling complete. The instantly engaging drum machine at the start, the ongoing groove that it carries throughout with the robotic, and the... Oh, that's probably my favorite part of it, like goddamn it fills my ears with pure ecstasy. Also, this song doesn't repeat its ideas until they'll milk dry halfway through the runtime. If anything, the last 2 minutes of the song are the best part of the song, with how much the song evolves into something bigger and grander and more climatic. It's quite amazing. If every song on the album was as good as the first song, imagine the album we could have gotten, like goddamn imagine. Instead we get The Prime Time of Your Life as the next song. And it's ironic because if the title track was emblematic of everything I love about the album, The Prime Time of Your Life is emblematic of everything I don't like about the album. I mean, that's not to say that the song is necessarily awful, since it does have some promising elements on it. Hell, every song has some good elements on it, I will say. Even if it's only 1 song out of 10 that actually manages to fully work, and again, that's the title track. But still, this is what I mean when I say that the album's minimalistic approach doesn't really work that well. I mean, first of all, it doesn't flow well with the first song. Like, what, are you gonna tell me that we're gonna jump from this to this? I mean, come on. Also, the opening to this song in general is just weird. Like, I don't really know what it's trying to convey. If anything, it just kind of feels like a tech demo to test out some cool software effect. And I don't really like how it progresses either, it just feels incomplete to me. I mean, I do kind of like the droning in the second half, but I mean, I don't think it's really enough to save the song. Still, I guess I will give it credit because I think they actually tried to make it feel uncanny in a way that I think they actually intended. So yeah, props for that, I guess. I mean, in general, the song just feels aimless, incomplete, and just gives me the feeling that they didn't really know what they were doing. Oh, you guys were improvising? I don't know, man, it sounds more like you guys were just running out of ideas. Also, on re-listen, I don't think I actually like Robot Rock that much, actually. I mean, okay, it does start out pretty cool with those steady drums, and it does have one of the best riffs of the whole album, but you see, the problem is that the whole song is just that riff. They repeat that riff over and over and over again, and they don't really try to switch it up that often. It just feels, well, kind of headache inducing by the time the song ends. Daft Punk were always known for the repetition, sure, but with songs like Around the World or One More Time, it worked because there was a backbone to that repetition. Like, the songs managed to sound big and adventurous, and the loops just serve as the main piece of the song. With Robot Rock, not only you hear the same bird riff for way too long, but it's not really a riff that sounds good for repetition either. Again, you play that riff too many times and it gets annoying fast. And the rest of the album has several of the problems that I mentioned as well. Like, they introduce one or two elements that are unique and interesting, but again, they just repeat those elements over and over again. It manages to work a little well in something like The Brainwasher because it does somehow manage to become a little hypnotizing, like something that you will hear out of a Flash game. But most of the time it just becomes kind of annoying. It just feels like lazy songwriting to me that is used as an excuse to be, well, minimalistic. And I haven't even gotten to songs like Technologic, which just sounds like a weird knockoff of Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Emotion, which despite having a somber and even sort of haunting tone, feels like it goes for way too long and again just sort of feels like a tech demo. And Make Love, which actually, if Make Love is a fairly decent track, I forgot about that one. If I had to guess though, I think the band was also trying to go for sort of an uncanny feeling for the record. I mean, if there's one persistent thing about the album is that it does sound genuinely strange and alien throughout it all. And you know what, that's one thing that I do like about it, and it's also one of the few reasons why I find this album to be so fascinating. And I guess the minimalistic nature is also partly responsible as to why the album sounds as strange as it does. Like, even the music videos reflect that a lot. I have seen some people say that videos like Technologic feel like analog horror, and yeah, in a sense I can see why. The whole video feels like a fever dream, like I feel like that robot is gonna come out of my bed at some point. Yeah, all of the music videos for this album have kind of that uncanny edge to them. They're honestly kind of worth checking out. I think they're kind of cool. The album on release received mixed reviews from critics, and when it comes to cultural impact, it wasn't nearly as prominent as Discovery or even Homework. I think the most it got was the song Robot Rock being used in an iPod commercial. Yeah, I don't know, the album as a whole is not very good, but even then I am kind of glad it exists. It's weird, it's fascinating, and it still feels like it has its own identity to it. Anyways, that was the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next Spell's Basement.